Welcome back. I'm Veronica Cintron. Our Black History Month celebration continues tonight. Long before the Greek divers were working the sponge docks in Tarpon Springs, African Americans were already laying the groundwork. Bay News 9's Lori Davison has more in tonight's special assignment.
Ladies and gentlemen, tickets here, guys, for our next sponge boat ride.
Taking a tour of Tarpon Springs
Folks, you interested in a boat ride today?
is like visiting Greece
Anybody want to go sponge boat ride? Have a boat going out.
without ever leaving Florida. A mix of the showy and the cultural.
Whoopa!
A place where you can climb on a boat
Welcome aboard.
and soak up history in a city known as the sponge capital of the world. It's an industry dominated by the Greeks here. But dive in deeper and you'll find African Americans were among the first spongers in the region. They were called hookers for the techniques they used.
What they did in the early days before the Greeks came, sponges were harvested entirely by hooking them with a long hook from dinghies.
The city's curator of arts and historical resources, Tina Bukovalis, says in the early 1900s, Greek immigrants arrived in waves. Using diving methods, they were able to harvest 5 times as many sponges, eventually taking over the docks.
Many in the African American community went to work on their boats, often as crew members, engineers, cooks, but some as divers as well.
These are people that I knew personally.
Alfred Quarterman remembers it all. Walking through Rose Cemetery, he points out dozens of graves that belonged to blacks who worked in the sponge trade, including his father and uncle.
And believe it or not, they both spoke Greek fluently. Because after all, if you're on a boat for 2 months or so back there, you better understand something that's going on.
Alfred recalls a closeness between the two communities.
I have never had a problem with Greeks because when my father went out on a boat, it was not unusual for the families to invite me over to their house. That's when I learned about goat cheese, feta they call it, and spaghetti, and Greek candy.
Most of the African American spongers are gone now, their contributions marked in gravestones at the cemetery. But Alfred is keeping track.
Thomas Stout, Florida. Reuben Smith, Bahamas. Thomas Knowles, Florida. John Johnson, Johnny Johnson, Frank Fisher.
He worries about their impact being forgotten.
And you'd hate to see anybody that lose their identity because nobody thought about them anymore.
So he's working to have the cemetery designated as a National Historical Site.
And when I see the history of my father and my uncle, I'm very proud of that. And I love it.
The pioneering spirit of those early spongers still living on in people's hearts and minds on the docks to this day. In Tarpon Springs, Lori Davison, Bay News 9.
And historians say the hooking techniques used by the black sponge divers came from the Bahamas and West Indies. Many of them started working in the industry in Key West and then migrated to Tarpon Springs in the late 1800s.